A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Today we're going to talk about the power of the individual and how individuals have in the past and also in the future shaped human history. Men and women have chosen beliefs, dared to dream, made decisions, stepped out, spoken out, and they've literally impacted the welfare and history of the human world. Names like Winston Churchill, Florence Nightingale, Abraham Lincoln, and even Napoleon have left their mark in popular thinking and culture. And the Bible, of course, also gives us the list of names of individuals who have impacted their world. And the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, is a prime example of this. We'll discuss this topic today. Our special guest is Peta Soorkia. She is a former pastor, now a Christian wellness coach. She's a speaker, author, and couples counselor, and she leads Empowering You. And Peta Soorkia, I'd like to welcome you to 2020 today.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you for having me back. It's lovely to be back.
Well, you're back for a reason, Peta, because you were so good last time. And we are going to do it again. And I love the topic that you've chosen today. You wanted us to talk about the power of one. Tell me about the power of one.
It's just one person can change a whole community, a whole nation, a whole world, Andrew. So the power is certainly inherent in all of us. And if we're Christians and the power's coming from the Lord, just how much more do we have? So talking about just one is one of my favourite subjects because some years ago, I got a phrase in my head that was woman of influence. And I just thought, what's that? And I sat on it for a bit. And then one day I'm in a conference and I just saw some stuff on the screen and it was, this is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be raising money, a team of people, a team of women raising money to rescue people from around the world who are involved in trafficking. And so me, just one person, took that on board, listened to the Lord, and off I went. And so now, 13 years later, we've raised thousands and thousands of dollars to that end. So I'm just a little person, you know. I'm no one different to anybody else that's listening. We're all significant. So I'm going to say I'm significant because we all are. But if we sit behind this speaker at church and hide behind the screens or whatever, if we don't put ourselves out there, then how are we going to affect change? So my message is just one. You're a listener. Just one. Okay, you're just one person. And you might say to yourself, well, what can I do? I'm just one person. Yes, you're just one person. And as you look down in history, as you mentioned, Andrew, people have affected significant change being just one person stepping out.
Yeah, so true. And it's really encouraging to hear that you actually took a step yourself as one person and you've seen all that money raised. But have you got some stories of outcomes of lives changed as a result of the money you've raised?
Oh, we don't. We raise the money and we fund it to another organisation. So we get little stories. We don't get specific, this person because of your money, because we're one of a whole group of people around the world who are raising money for this large organisation. But when you see what people have come from, you see that they've come from being trafficked in the sex trade through no fault of their own, maybe naivety, many times, children, boys, girls, men who are involved in the slave trade. When you see them come into a place of freedom and you see their faces and you read their stories, it's just phenomenal. So we know that we have helped in that end, towards that end, with countless people. And, you know, one day in heaven, we're going to see those people, some of those people. We're going to see them. And so we're going to know that what we did on earth was well worth it, even though we know now, but we're going to see the fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you mind, what's the name of the organisation you guys support? Let's give them a plug.
Yeah, sure. It's A21. So that's Christine Kane's initiative with her husband. A21's global, 14 different centres around the world. She started in one in Greece. Her background is Greek, and that's where it started. And so now, you know, many years later, I don't know how long she's been doing that, but we've been at it since 2013, so she was around since well before that. So thousands and thousands of women, men, children have been rescued.
Yeah, so good, isn't it? Because it is a modern tragedy in the modern world, isn't it? The whole trafficking thing going on. And also, today, the world is so complicated, isn't it, Peter? And there's so much information. We have so much access to news on all media platforms, social media, mainstream media, you name it. And it's very easy for people today, I think, to feel a little bit overwhelmed, isn't it? A little bit like, you know what can I do? You know, this world is just big and it's bad and it's crazy and I'm being bombarded with so much negative news. Do you think the average person can easily just sort of give up mentally or even spiritually and say, you know what, this is too hard. I'm just going to live my little life and not even try and think bigger than that?
Absolutely. It is overwhelming. And you look at the news, you turn the news on and it's very depressing. There's wars, there's famine, there's hardship, there's difficulty. If you're blessed one day watching the news, you might get a good news story at the end just to perk you up a bit. But basically watching the news is pretty depressing because the world is a depressing place. You know, are we in the end times? Many people think we are. But yes, it's very easy just to stay in your own little segment of the world, your own little community, excuse me, and just do what you need to do to keep your house alive and kicking and doing okay, because there's a lot of problems in our own homes. You know, we have issues and it's hard in relationships, communication, money, finances, health. So just getting by is what many people do. And hey, I understand that. I've lived quite a longish life. I'm in my 60s. And, I've had health issues, I've had financial issues, I've had relationship issues, I've had marriage issues, you name them, I've had the issues. And I know if you're listening, you've got some issues. And it's just very easy just to stay there and get through your own issues because they're hard enough. But there's this amazing thing that the Bible says it's more blessed to give than receive. And we know that from positive psychology. As you give to others, you yourself feel better. It's a psychological truth, and the research proves that. So as you step out of your own, I'm going to call it misery, maybe you're not miserable, but it feels a bit like that sometimes. As you step out of that and do something for someone else, it's amazing what happens to your own peace of mind, your own feelings of well-being. The good hormones start up, the negative hormones start to dissipate a little bit. So it's really therapeutically valuable to step out and do something for someone else. And then once you see the results and you see the fruit of that, you think, I want to do some more of this. I've got to say, every time we have a gala for our organisation, which is called A Woman of Influence, every time we have a gala, we're coming up to it, I'm thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I think I'm doing this because God has not told me to stop as yet. He told me to start, so I'm still going.
That's the way, Peter. You keep charging on there. And it's funny because, everything you've just described, the way our world is and how people are feeling, believe it or not, from my reading of the Bible, many times in the Bible, the world was just as dark. If you look at the time of Jesus, the Roman Empire had crushed the Israelite nation. They were under their heel. They had no real political rights. There was no real freedom. And, they could have given up, but they didn't give up. And Jesus obviously started a kingdom which has outgrown and outlived the Roman Empire. But even in the Old Testament, so many of the stories, people were born in a really dark time and they rose up. So I want to ask you, Peter, who are some of your favourite Bible individuals who just rose up and just did something for God against all odds?
There's Old Testament and New Testament. I'll just give you a few of my favourites and then I'll give you my favourites, absolute.
Okay.
So Abraham went to a new land. He didn't know where he was going, but he was going. How would that be? You pack up your bags and you're off, but you don't know where you're landing. It's phenomenal, and I don't know if we'd be able to do that today. Moses, he led the Israelites out of Egypt. Again, a trip that was to take 11 days took 40 years, and he had to look after that crowd of misbehaving, grumbling Israelites, but he kept going. He kept going because he had the vision from the Lord to get them out. He received the 10 Commandments, and how awesome was that? But how scary must that have been as well? So he's dealing with all these difficult, horrible people, but loved the Lord and was obedient to him. Then there's New Testament. We've got the apostles. We've got Paul, who hated the church and did everything he could to bring the church down. Became Paul from Saul. And Peter, I love that because I've got a similar name, Peter. He denied Christ 3 times, right at the last moment. But Jesus just forgave him and released him as the rock, and that's what the name means, as the bedrock of the church. Some of my favourites happen to be females, and one of them in the Old Testament, I just love Esther. I love Esther because she had a position of power, but she was afraid to use it until Mordecai, her uncle, cousin, whatever he was, he said, no, come on, you can do it. And she said, okay. She took the bull by the horns and she said, okay, we're going to fast and pray, and then I'm going to go before the king. And she changed the whole trajectory of the Jewish nation. Without her, there wouldn't be a Jewish nation.
And she caused the move of God too, because if you read the end of that book, it says many of the people of the land became Jews, which means salvation broke out in many of their hearts. And one of my colleagues at Vision here, and I'll give her a plug, Phil from the Rise and Shine breakfast show. We were just talking about Esther. She loves Esther as well. But we're also saying, this woman, obviously taken into a harem effectively with a non-believing heathen king. And she goes into their job interview was basically sleep with this guy. I mean, that's not my idea of a good time. But, she had to go and sleep with this guy who's sleeping with hundreds of other women who are all beautiful. And somehow Esther found in her heart to love this guy when he didn't deserve to be loved. And even on that first night job interview, she obviously loved him so much that he was like, this is the nicest woman I've ever met in my whole life. And he marries her. I mean, it's an amazing story, isn't it?
It's an amazing story. And to move from the security of being brought up by Mordecai, family relative who cared for her and loved her and told her and led her and guided her, to such a contrasting environment. Ungodly, and as you say, in a harem, and her job description is just to sleep with the boss and just be one of thousands. But yes, somewhere in her was God. God was in her. How could she do that? God. How can we step out? How can we be the just one to effect change? God. That's the only way we can do it. It's the only way I know.
Yeah, and she just demonstrated that unconditional love of God, which is just not of this world. And I'm just thinking she must have a massive acreage property in heaven. What do you think, Peter? She's really...
Yeah, I can't wait to meet her.
She's really done a good job, hasn't she? Maybe she's got her own palm branch up there too. She waves in the throne room. But let's talk about secular history. Who are some of your favourite figures from just history, whether they're Christians or not? Because let's be honest, some people who aren't Christians have also had a really big impact in the world. Yes.
So some that I like to consider because of my background in counselling, coaching, and psychology. Freud. Before Freud, people who were mentally unstable or had mental health issues went to mental asylums. Before that, they were burned at the stake because they were probably, they thought, in witchcraft. So Freud came along and said, well, no, there's something wrong with these people, and he coined the term psychology and, the unconscious and the subconscious in psychology. So before him, those words didn't exist. So in that arena, some of the words that we use every day are things that were made up, words that were just made up from some of these amazing people in the world of psychology. Jumping back in history quite a long time and looking at biblical history, we might look at Constantine, and he put out an edict in 313 AD, which said it was illegal to persecute Christians. Well, that was a big plus for Christianity. Before that, everyone was hiding, and it was a crime. So Christianity took off because he embraced it. So we can look back in biblical history, we can look back in psychological history, we can see amazing changes in the world. And perhaps someone I'll talk about who's still living in psychological history, and his name is Martin Seligman. He's one of my favourites in the world of psychology because he decided at the end of the last century, all this psychology looking at people's ill health and suffering and what's wrong with people is not a good way to do business in the world of psychology. And he thought, what about if we look at people who are doing things well? What about if we see how they're doing things well? What do they do that makes them well in their mental health? So that was a first. And as he started to, I guess, sell this idea to the world of psychologists around the world, he had people giving him standing ovations in his area of expertise, psychology. He used to be the CEO of the American Psychological Association, so he's well known, well respected, and people would listen to him. But this was the first time that people were actually crying in the audience and saying, we've wanted something like this. And so that was then he birthed positive psychology.
Wow.
Sounds a bit strange, but it's a good stuff. It's based on biblical principles.
Well, you sound like a real Christian wellness coach there, Peter, because two of your three have been in from psychology. Good old Sigmund and that last guy. What was that last guy's name again? The modern guy?
Martin Seligman.
Yep, there you go. I'm going to tell you mine, Peter. One of my favourites is Alexander the Great.
Okay. Tell me about him.
Well, I mean, he never lost a battle. He was always outnumbered. And he literally just conquered and conquered and conquered. But he also had this great ability to win people to himself. So whenever he conquered lands, he learnt the local culture. He wore the local clothes, and he really connected. And he really did build an empire. And what he did was he taught the world to speak Greek. So because Alexander taught the Middle East how to speak Greek, when the apostles and Jesus came along, they were able to write the Bible in Greek, and Greek was the unifying language of the world. So if you want to look at it theologically, the book of Daniel prophesied about a Greek king that would go and conquer the Persians and defeat the Persians in battle. I actually believe God had a plan for Alexander to conquer the world so that the world would learn to speak Greek. So when the gospel came, we could share the gospel much more easily through the Greek language.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. Well, thank you for giving me that information. I love it.
And I'm going to put it out there too. I don't think he was gay. I know they made a movie about him recently, and of course they tried to make out he was gay, but the Greeks were just very affectionate, and they were warriors, and I'm just going to put it out there. He wasn't gay because he's one of my heroes, and my son's middle name is Alexander. I named my boy Ryan Alexander after Alexander because he was a real hero in history, and as I said, always outnumbered, but a military genius, just worked out tactics and strategies to win. And he really kept the Eastern nations and those Eastern religions at bay so that Greek culture could flourish. And, of course, in the Western democracies across the world now, we've learnt so much and mirrored so much from the Greek civilization. So we needed that Greek influence to remain strong in the world. But you know what? I want to ask our listeners, Peter, who is your favourite figure in history? And tell us why, because this is really interesting, because I think it's a healthy thing to be inspired by people, to be inspired by history. And who is your favourite Bible character? There are so many individuals in the Bible who are just great heroes and real legends of the faith. And we want you to call us today and tell us why. Why do you like them so much? How do they inspire you? Because we're going somewhere here, aren't we, Peter? We're trying to encourage people today to maybe just have a little think and a little pray like you did. How can I make a difference in my life? You know, how can I do something with my lifetime, this brief amount of time God's given us on the earth? What can I do to make a difference in our world? So I want to encourage everyone today, call us on 1-800-316-316. That's 1-800-316-316, and tell us who is your favourite figure from history and who is your favourite Bible hero from the Old or the New Testaments. We would love to hear from you today here on Vision.
Immerse yourself in rich biblical history and Christian heritage with Vision Tours, exploring Australia, the Holy Lands and other global destinations. Forge bonds of lasting friendship as you fellowship with like-minded believers and discover a new richness in your faith in Christ and a broader understanding of the world's Christian heritage. Enjoy the fellowship of a lifetime with Vision Tours. Explore upcoming tour packages at vision.org.au/tours.
A biblical perspective on life, culture, and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Welcome back to 2020 on this Wednesday. Hope your day has started well, and I really hope that you have a favourite figure from history, maybe a Bible character, maybe a Christian hero. There are so many Christians that have stepped up over the years and who aren't in the Bible because it's post-Bible, but they've made a massive difference in the world. My special guest today is Peta Soorkia. She's a former pastor, but you know what, Peter? I say once a pastor, always a pastor. She's still a pastor, but she's also now a Christian wellness coach. She's a speaker, an author, and a couples counsellor. And she leads Peta Empowering You. And we've got people calling in already. But Peter, post-Bible, who else is a favourite Christian hero of yours? Someone who's just done something for God with their life.
Billy Graham. What a man.
What a man. He was a man, wasn't he?
Yeah, he had an audience of billions of people, preached to more live people than anyone in Christian history, and more people got saved as a result. So he was one man, and his message didn't really change. It was just God loves you, love him, and you'll be saved. Repent, simple message. Simple gospel message, and change the world, change Christianity.
Yeah, and look, we're going to give him a plug this Saturday night. His grandson is preaching on the Gold Coast, and it's called a Look Up Celebration. Vision are going to be broadcasting it across Australia live this Saturday evening. But you're right, I mean, Billy Graham was a phenomenal communicator and preacher, but I mean, for me, the thing I love about him the most is he maintained his morals and his integrity. Because if ever someone was tempted, you can imagine how much the devil threw at him because of the impact he was having. Yes. And he maintained his integrity right up until the end. So he went to heaven with clean hands and a clean conscience. Do you know much about his behind-the-scenes morals and his integrity, the things that he did to stay on the straight path?
I don't, but I know he prayed and I know he was faithful.
Yeah, he was. Okay, so I'm going to share a hot tip. So this is something I learnt from his life, which I applied. I'm like you, I'm a pastor, and he never spent time alone with a woman. Once he was married, he would never spend time alone with a woman, including his secretary and his admin staff. And, I used to say to people, it's very difficult to fall into a wrong relationship when you're not alone with someone. Not many people have committed adultery at a party with there's 15 other people around. And so it was a simple rule that he adopted. And it worked to the very end because he wouldn't even go for a walk down the road to buy coffee with his secretary's PA. He was always with other people when women were around, and he lasted the distance. And I think some of our more charismatic brothers over the years probably would have heard that, Peter, and said, he had no faith, or I don't need to do that. I'm okay. But as we know, a lot of the charismatic leaders have fallen over the years, and they probably didn't have those same strong boundaries in their world that Billy Graham had, and he stayed true. And I've personally always adopted that as well. So there's a hot tip for all of our young players out there. If you want to live a long and a good life full of integrity and morals, have little rules for yourself, because sometimes rules, they're not legalism, are they, Peter? They actually work.
Well, the other thing is that the attack on people in positions of power and seniority and positions of affecting change in the Christian community, the attack is bigger than anything we can understand. So as soon as you step out, the attack gets harder, bigger, stronger. So to have those rules is really so important. So important. I love that. I love that he did that. And yes, he stayed pure. And recently, over the years, we've seen great men and women fall and of the church, and it's sad because it takes a whole lot of people down.
Yeah, it is sad. And there seems to be a lot of it going on. I think there's a cleaning out going on. Some of the megachurch pastors in America recently, things have come out in the last couple of weeks, which is just very, very sad. But we have a caller, Peter, so I'm curious to hear what he's got to say, and it is of Vince. Vince, welcome to the show today.
Oh, g'day, Andrew. How are you? Yeah. I think I'll get a couple, three figures. One figure for biblical, I think John the Apostle. First of all, because I study so deeply, the dystopia we're in the end times. Well, he was the writer of the author, of Revelation. I really identify with verse chapter 1, verse 9. I am John, your brother, fellow partaker in the tribulation on the Isle of Patmos for the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. But the second thing is, too, he was with Peter, James, and John when Jesus had the transfiguration. Yeah. And witnessed Jesus conversing with Moses and Elijah. To me, that's a classical linking of the New Testament to the Old Testament. Yeah. They had a talk where who would you like to spend 30 minutes with, in heaven with? I think for me it would be John, the Apostle.
So you're looking forward to a coffee with John, hey, when you get up there?
Yeah. I could make it there. I think I would love that.
Well, there'll be a long queue, but I think we've got time. But it's funny though. Yeah, when you say that, I'm thinking he wrote John, he wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and he wrote Revelation. So he actually wrote quite a bit of Bible, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah, he did. He was the only one apostle that wasn't martyred. The figure, and I think if I get, well, still not secular, but not biblical. I think two figures, Polish Catholic clerics. There was Pope John Paul II. He played a role, I think, really in the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that was that. And but another figure, lesser known, but also he would be like in Poland, close second. Pope John Paul II. You wouldn't hear about outside of Poland is Stefan Wyszynski. He was the primate of Poland. Okay. And he played a key role, I think, in I think really keeping the Catholic Church alive under communist oppression. I think the Catholic Church in Poland during the Cold War was in a much healthier state than the Catholic Church is here now in a woke Australia. Yeah.
Well, the church always thrives under persecution, doesn't it? I mean, people suffer, but the church definitely thrives. So I'm going to ask you a question, Vince. I mean, they're really inspirational men, those ones. But what about you, Vince? How does that inspire you? And have you got something in your heart that you want to maybe hope or dream of doing or making a difference in some way?
I would look. What's happening now with the dystopia, like you were just talking with Wendy Francis, like with this gender affirmation, this demonic gender affirmation, and the other lies going out there, like with the COVID jabs. Also, this falsehood too with the climate change scam. It's all combining, I think, to oppress us, lead us down this path of dystopia. I'm committed to just telling people the truth, because if we can get the truth out there, I have a feeling we could be in for a golden age. We're on the brink, I think, between the golden age and maybe complete or utter darkness. Yep. Yeah.
Well, and if men and women like you stand up, Vince and myself and Peter, all of us included, and we do speak the truth and we do what God's called us to do, there's no reason why it can't be a golden age. Because, the Bible says in the last days, I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh. And to me, that's a good thing. That means God's going to be moving right up until the very end. So, we've just got to stay focused and focused on the Lord. And, with John, what I was thinking when you said that before, how much you love John, what a great testimony of a man that loved Jesus. He wanted to be on the breast of Jesus. He was just so close to Jesus. He loved him so much. And because of that, God trusted him, didn't he? And he used him in such a powerful way. So I guess the message there for all of our listeners today is we've just got to be close to Jesus, just committed to him. And he can open up the doors and use us in wonderful ways.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. Look, sometimes in this dystopia, sometimes you can get a bit depressed. I got a friend, sometimes you feel, you get depressed with all that. I think probably the biblical worldview helps you get through, when you have these bouts of depression.
Absolutely, mate. It keeps your eyes on the Lord and God's word can sustain us and keep us healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, without a doubt. But Vince, I want to thank you so much for calling in today. Those are three, great figures there. And thanks for calling. God bless you. Have a super day, huh?
You too. Thanks, Andrew. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Peter. So, in getting back to other figures in history, Christians who've made a huge difference, I want to put it out there as well to our listeners. Give us a call. Who is your favourite figure from history? A Christian, non-Christian, doesn't matter. I'm just curious because it's a real insight into your personality. But all of us, I believe, we need heroes, don't we, Peter? We need people that we aspire to, like you with Billy Graham and different ones that we say, God, use me like that person. I think this is something God's put in all of us, isn't it? This need for heroes that can inspire us.
Yeah, and we don't want them so high on a pedestal that they become idolatry. We can have heroes, and it's good to have heroes. But at the end of the day, the only one that's on the pedestal is Jesus. So we keep him there, and we look to because it's so easy, isn't it, in the pop culture and some of those people and put them on a pedestal. I know someone that idolizes different rock bands and calls them God, and it's a shame because there's only one God. So yeah, keep him up there, and other people can inspire us and motivate us and encourage us to get out there and do the little bit that we can in our part of the world.
Absolutely. And I think in the age of celebrity, which we're in now, I don't think celebrities do inspire us. I think they somehow medicate us and sort of make us feel good in the moment watching their success and watching what they do. But I think very few of them actually inspire us to greatness and inspire us to actually do something significant with our lives. I'll tell you another figure from human history who wasn't a Christian, who just made a real difference and did a really good job, and that was Ataturk. You know, the Turkish leader during the Gallipoli campaign. He was the one who basically got to the beaches, summed up the situation, unlike all the British and Australian commanders who couldn't work out what was going on, and said, let's go to the high ground, take the high ground, we win. And of course they won. And then after the war, he became their prime minister, and he was a very fair and balanced and almost secular leader of Turkey, and he brought Turkey into the modern world. And I know that some of the extreme Islamic clerics would try and pressure him and to make Turkey an Islamic state, but he's like, no, we're going to be welcoming of everyone. He was actually a great leader, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? That even sometimes non-Christians can still do great things and good things with their lives if they live by principles which you can actually find in the Word of God anyway. But that's another example of an individual who's made a difference. Have you got another one, Peter, before we go to news, say another figure in history post-Bible who inspires you?
I think, again, someone who's current, that would be James Dobson. So he was originally focused on the family, he's now retired, but just a good man, and kept us all on the straight and narrow, and kept family values really top.
Yeah,
good
awesome
man.
Awesome guy. We're going to go to the news right now. We have Peta Soorkia with us, a former pastor, still a pastor, and a Christian wellness coach, speaker, author, and couples counsellor. She leads Peta Empowering You. After the news, we're going to talk more about individuals in history that have shaped history. And the studio has been stormed today by Phil from the Rise and Shine program, as in DJ and Phil. DJ is at home resting from his chainsaw accident, but Phil has stormed into the studio because she just wants to share something with us. Phil, welcome to 2020.
Oh, thank you. Yes, you make it sound very dramatic when you say chainsaw incident. It was a gardening incident.
With a chainsaw.
Yeah, there was a chainsaw involved. But I was excited because you inspired, and you both are chatting this morning about how inside we can be feeling like we're in a dark world. And you mentioned that, Andrew, that in the Bible times, actually, we find Bible heroes in some very dark situations, not in a godly environment, and yet God raises them up at the appropriate time. And you mentioned Esther, who happens to be one of my favourites. So I thought I'd run on in and see what this was all about.
Well, please do, because there's not many women who have a book of the Bible named after them, and she's one of them. You got Ruth and Esther. That's it, isn't it? That's
right. And look, technically, the Jesus isn't in there. It's unlike many of the other books in the Bible. But I'm really inspired. I was one of the days I was, sometimes I don't know, no one else probably does this, but you sometimes complain to God. Do you ever do that, Peter? Probably not. It's probably just me.
Every day, every morning.
And I was like, God, this is hard. I was in a situation. And God said to me, you know what? You know who was in a harder situation than you? And that's Esther. She was actually in a harem. Have you considered that I put her there? And that I was putting her there for such a time as this, and I was using her, but I actually put her in a situation. She was a Jewish girl, clearly a very devout Jewish girl, under her uncle's care. And this would have been a situation that was so foreign to her, and that in the natural would have seemed so ungodly, and yet God was right in the midst of that. Don't you think that's incredible, Andrew?
It actually is incredible. I love her so much. She's actually one of my heroes too. I mean, I'm a man, but I have a female hero, Phil.
You're allowed that.
I love Esther for so many reasons, but let's talk about the choices she made. She made some amazing choices.
Well, I love the fact that she was honouring to her heritage. And so when Mordecai said to her, hey, Esther, I don't want you talking about your faith, nowadays, many of us would go, really? Are you sure I'm going to go out there loud and I'm going to be proud that I'm Jewish? And he actually said, no, hold back on that. So she had wisdom, but also when she went into the king, she could have chosen anything. And you just think some of the ladies would have chosen incredible. They had access to gold and silver and jewels and also maybe a tambourine. Who knows what they were allowed to take
I'm thinking musical instruments, dancing outfits, juggling balls. I mean, they would have been trying to stand out, wouldn't they, and make themselves unique and different.
You think so. But it says here, if we look at Esther too, that actually she went to accept the advice of Haggai, who was the person in charge, the eunuch there, and she only took what he suggested. So you see her just such wisdom at such a young age that she was listening to the advice of her family. She was taking the advice of those around her. And as a result, we also see then God's hand upon her life with incredible favour, that she was in front of who would have been most powerful man at that world at that time, who had the ability to say yes or no to her. And as a result of God's input and her wisdom, was then able to save her people. An incredible story of what God can do. And Peter, you talked at the beginning about that. You said the power of just stepping up and saying yes and looking, what can I do? What's in my hand? Inspiring.
So good. I love your passion, Phil, for Esther, because she's just a legend of the faith. Now, we've got some callers, and I'm really curious to hear who their heroes are as well. I'm going to go to Wayne first up. Wayne, welcome to 2020.
Thank you very much.
Who's your favourite figure, mate? Who are you inspired by?
Latorne.
Yep, tell us about...
Him?
No, I don't, mate. Tell me more.
Well, Latorne was the man that invented the scraper.
Okay.
And I read a book on him called, I think it was Mover of Men and Mountains. And he was a Christian, and he used to speak to his men on a Wednesday at lunchtime, and he would share the gospel with them. He went bankrupt a couple of times, but his staff were so loyal to him, they paid money, they invested money into his company to get him out of debt.
Wow.
So he was an amazing man. I think he was involved with the FEBC, the Far Eastern Broadcasting Company, which was Christian, ministry going out on the air.
Yeah.
But one thing you'd be interested in, you've been talking about Billy Graham today. And I read where, I think I was listening to a Vision radio broadcast, and I think it was his grandson. Anyway, he said that his dad used to support different Christian ministries. He had a male secretary.
Yep.
And they'd pick out 8 a month or something.
Amazing.
And they got a letter from 4 young men who were doing tent meetings, evangelism in Russia, and they'd run out of money. So they'd written to him and asked if he could help. So he decided to support them. And when they came back from Russia, when it was all finished, they gave him a detailed account for every cent that was spent and where it was spent.
Yeah, amazing.
He decided to support those 4 men, and one of them was Billy Graham.
Incredible. Wayne, can you tell me his name again, this character? What's his name? Say his name one more time.
Latorne.
Beautiful name. We have a lot of callers coming through today, Wayne. I want to thank you so much for sharing your hero, and we want to hear your hero as well. Anyone listening today, call us on 1-800-316-316. Wayne, thank you so much for calling 2020 today.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to other callers here, and we have got Candice from Runaway Bay, I should say, in Queensland. Candice, who is your favourite figure from human history?
Hi. Before I answer your question, I just want you to know I've been listening to you guys since 2004, and I'm a monthly donor since 2004. So I love you guys to bits.
Well, we love you too. Thank you for listening and being so loyal. What a blessing. What a blessing.
Is it okay if I pick 2 people?
You sure can, Candice. As a long-term listener and supporter of Vision, you can pick 3 if you want.
Oh, thank you. Well, my first one would be Mother Teresa.
Yep.
Because the unconditional love and the selflessness of that woman just blows my mind when I think about it. She must have so many big crowns in heaven.
Absolutely.
And then the second one I picked was Corrie ten Boom after her suffering in World War II. And then she dedicated herself to her family. And I just think those people just deserve to be mentioned because I think they have got the biggest mansions in heaven.
Yeah, absolutely. They both paid a huge price, didn't they? A huge sacrifice. So, love it. Well, you know what, Candice, so good to hear your voice. And you sound like you're from South Africa. What part of South Africa are you from?
I'm from Johannesburg.
Joburg. So, are you Afrikaans or British? What's your heritage?
No. I'm more British.
You're British. So I won't waste my one Afrikaan word on you, I know. So I'll save it up for...
Yeah, I can speak Afrikaans perfectly because it had to be my second language. But yes, I'm pretty much English. But thank you so much for just listening to me today.
Hey, well, thanks for sharing your two figures. Yeah, I mean, Mother Teresa and Corrie ten Boom, two women who just stepped up and really just gave their lives for the cause of helping other people. And but you know what, Candace? Thank you so much for calling in today. We got lots of people calling. This is really interesting. I'm loving this. And you have a super day, Candace. God bless you, Candace.
You too. Bye now.
Okay, see ya.
Bye now.
Peter, we're getting lots of calls here. This topic's really, it's ringing a nerve in people, isn't it?
It is. Yes, and I love those last two that Candace mentioned. And I thought to myself, why didn't I think of them? Because I just love Corrie ten Boom when you read her story and how she was able to forgive the prison warden that did shocking things that she saw, and how she could forgive him, and he became her neighbour, I think. And so amazing story. And
even
we can
with
just
that,
see these.
Sorry.
We can just see these people who are exhibiting the love of Christ, and that can motivate us.
Absolutely. And when you said that, I thought of what Phil said, and that Esther made choices. Yeah, I mean, God used Esther, but she made choices. And Corrie ten Boom made choices. Mother Teresa chose to go to India and dedicate her life. And I think this seems to be the common theme in these people that really leave their mark. It's they make choices that maybe are not popular, not convenient, not easy at times, but they make the call, they make the choice, and God uses them. But we got other callers, and I'm really curious to hear who their favourite figure from history is. And Elizabeth, we'll go to you first. Elizabeth, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you. I nearly rang up at Rise and Shine about when they were talking about having a meal with someone, but I didn't get around to it. But I just thought I'd take this opportunity because my favourite subject, and it is in the Bible, is Hannah, who was Samuel's mother. And I just admired her. And Phil was talking about when she came through that, people who do great things and yet they've probably been through great depressions. And I thought about Hannah. Well, she's always been a favourite of mine, but she would have been so depressed because not having children in that day and age was such, they were looked down upon, they were outcast almost. And when she had Samuel, before she had him, she dedicated him to the Lord, and each year would take him to the temple, she kept him till he was a weaned, which would have been so hard for her to give up. And each year she would go to the temple and make a new coat for him. But what an amazing woman to do that. And Samuel was a great prophet and was so instrumental in the Old Testament, and we hear so much about him. Yeah.
Absolutely. Peter, what do you want to say about Hannah? She was in a mini harem too, wasn't she? She was sharing her husband with another woman, which wouldn't be my idea of a good time if I was a wife, that's for sure. But Peter, you got some thoughts on Hannah?
Yeah, look, Hannah, how can you give up the son that you've waited for forever and only see him once a year? The pain, my mother's heart feels her pain even now as I say that. But that was the dedication, and as you were saying, Andrew, to make a choice. She made a choice, okay, if I have a child, he will be yours, Lord. So she made that decision, the child came, and so she followed through. And I think we can make choices, and I think sometimes it's hard to follow through. So it's all about the follow through.
Absolutely. What about you, Phil? I'm sure you had some thoughts there too when we were talking about Hannah.
Yeah, look, and I do. What a great choice. I love that she did step out in faith, but then also God said, if she gave up Samuel, she had other sons and daughters. And I love that in that story, that there's a reflection of God's grace as well. He's like, you've given, and here you go. I'm going to bless your family with more. And I just love that. And also you can see in her that faith. She's in tears. She's in that place of depression or, very sad, great grief when she's praying. As soon as she's given that promise, you will have a child, you immediately see in the Bible says she went out with joy. Her demeanor changed immediately. She stepped out in faith. And that is what faith is. It's actually that firm decision. Yes, I trust God. I am going to see this through. Even before she was pregnant. Yeah. She was pregnant with the promise, and that showed on her face. Wow. And I think as Christians, there's so much to that. And Hannah, what an inspiration.
Wow, that's good. Phil, you got to come in here more often. This is great.
Well, I'm loving it.
Elizabeth, you are inspiring so many good things here. But, I just want to put it out there. Elizabeth is from a place near Gawler in South Australia. Is it Williston? Where is Gawler and where is Williston, Elizabeth? Tell us.
Gawler is north of Adelaide, probably about 45 minutes from Adelaide.
Okay, so just north of that. Is that where they start growing wine or not quite north enough?
Sorry?
Is that a winemaking region or we aren't quite north enough yet?
Well, I'm actually on the edge of the Barossa Valley, yeah.
I see, only the winemaking region.
Gorgeous part of the world.
Well, we love all the different listeners across Australia as well. I just want to put that out that you are a South Australian listener because we just love getting callers from all across Australia. And I want to thank you so much for your call today and sharing your favourite figure from Bible history, who is Hannah, who was just a beautiful, amazing woman who God used. And, thanks for the call, Elizabeth.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for all you do. Thank you. God bless.
Now, we've got a very patient young man called Ted on the line. Ted, are you there?
Yeah, thanks for saying young man.
We all are young because Moses went to 120, mate. So until I get to 119, I'm going to call myself young. And what part of Victoria are you from, Ted?
Southwest.
Southwest. So who's your favourite figure in history who inspires you?
Well, there was a couple of things. King David was my favourite figure in the Bible, aside from Jesus, of course. But he was a shepherd's boy. He looked after sheep. He even called in to see the shearing done. I can't remember where that is in the Bible, but he called, and I've been a shearer most of my life. And I love his whole story. He mucked up. He did things wrong. Jesus used him unreal through life. And he strikes a nerve with me in a lot of things he did. And I totally admire him. I admire what God did with him too.
Well, I'm gonna pop in here because I'm a man. I hear you, brother. I love David because he was a man's man, wasn't he? Like I said, he was a man of the land. He looked after sheep. He paid for his first wife with 200 foreskins of the Philistines. And you think about that. I mean, he killed 200 guys and he cut their foreskins off. I mean, that's hardcore stuff. That's hardcore.
Yeah,
but he had a soft heart, a heart to worship and a heart to pray. He had both bases covered, didn't he? He's just an amazing human. I think another dude in heaven that's well worth a latte with. What do you reckon?
Oh, yeah.
Peter, what are your thoughts on David? How does David inspire you?
Oh, what a man. He was so patient. He waited for his complete role as he walked through the wilderness and hid in the wilderness being chased by Saul. And at no time did he dishonour Saul. He could have killed him and he didn't, but he patiently waited for God's timing. I wonder how many of us are impatient with the things that we believe God has called us to do and want it yesterday, and we try and storm heaven and earth for things to happen today. But if we just sit and wait, God's timing is perfect. So that's what I see about him. He was a patient man who waited for God's timing.
Oh, I love that. What about you, Phil? I've got to get your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, look, the piece of that story, there's so many. I love that he encouraged himself in the Lord. But I love it when he first becomes a leader. You see him at the cave of Adullam, and there are 400 men who come to join him. And you would think he would attract the best of the best, right? I would want the strong soldiers. I would want the guys who are the best. But it says in the Bible that all those who were in distress, in debt, or discontented, they came to him. But if you look at the end of his story, it actually talks about David's mighty men. And you see these guys who do incredible feats and were renowned. And these are the same men who came to him in debt and distress. So what was it about hanging out with David that rubbed off on them? And that's what we can learn about leadership. He obviously was leading them and teaching them. There was something that happened in that cave that transformed the men. And I believe it's that he taught them about Jesus. He taught them about God. And you can see that in his songs. Wow. And that was transferred. And that's what happens when we can find people and stay with them in community.
Yeah, I love it. It's so good hearing different people's perspectives. Ted, you're inspiring some great conversation here. Have you got another figure? You said you had two, didn't you?
Oh, I just heard a guy on just before talking about Far East Christian Broadcasting, and he was talking about someone, that guy that wrote that book. It's fed my mind now. But he was talking, he helped support Far East Christian Broadcasting. My Uncle Alistair, was a director of Far East Christian Broadcasting, and he helped set up radio towers through Borneo, and he's been passed away for quite a while now. And one of my boys is now learning to be a pastor, following the same line as my Uncle Alistair, and that's it's amazing how God works. You never think some things, you never see some things how it'll go, and then God takes a different path with it.
Yeah,
amazing.
Hey, it is amazing. Ted, the call lines are lighting up, brother. I'm going to have to go and get another call in. But thank you so much for sharing today. You've just really stimulated some great conversation there with Peter and Phil's perspectives on King David. You have a super day, Ted. God bless, mate. And call us real soon again. Love hearing from Sherry's as well, mate. We'll have to hear some sharing stories off you one day as well, okay?
Cheers.
See you, mate. See you, mate. Now we're going to go to Teresa from WA, Katanning. I'm sorry, how do I pronounce that, Teresa? Is that right? How do I say it?
Yeah, Katanning.
Katanning. Okay, Teresa, I'm wrong both times. I'm not afraid to say I'm wrong. Teresa from Katanning. Yeah. Who's your favourite figure? Who inspires you?
I like all of the ones that you've been talking about, but I also think Dietrich Bonhoeffer needs a mention, and Martin Luther King Jr. They both stepped up for people who are very, very oppressed, and like in the Second World War, he went out and he even took the place of someone and died, Dietrich, in the end, because he wanted to save some of the people he was helping.
Yeah.
And he tried so hard to convince the Christian church that Hitler was wrong, but he went underground after he couldn't convince them.
Yeah.
So, and Martin Luther King, he stepped up and made such a difference to the African Americans. And he was a godly man too, and made such a difference to the people he was acting for.
So true, Teresa. There you two. Well, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to quickly go to Abraham because he's been patiently waiting. That will be our last call for today, but thank you so much for calling 2020 today.
Okay, God bless. Take care.
God bless you too. God bless you too. Abraham, thank you for being patient. He is calling from Fairfield in Sydney. Who is your favourite figure from history, Abraham?
Come on, it has to be Jesus.
Well done, mate. Well done. And we can't go past him, can we?
No, I learned a valuable lesson about patience and forgiveness. 4 years ago, I broke my neck and broke my back, and when I was lying in the hospital, when the neurosurgeon said to me, Abraham, you're not going to walk again, I said, whose authority do you say that to me? I've got a higher authority, his name's Jesus. And in 14 weeks, I walked out of the hospital. But in that time, also, I want to share this as well, that my ex-wife and my kids didn't want to come and see me because I've let them down, not supplying an income to them. But I remember Jesus forgave Judas, who betrayed him, and he still washed his feet. So I did the honourable thing recently to my ex-wife and my kids. I forgave them, and I did the same thing. I washed their feet with forgiveness.
Wow.
So that's a valuable lesson I learned out of that, and I think everyone who is listening to this, we all should forgive. No matter what you go through, you forgive. Once you forgive, you put a nice feeling in your heart and in the hearts of others as well.
Yeah. Hey, Abraham, mate, you've nailed it. You've nailed it. What a great way to finish. We've got to mention Jesus as the ultimate figure in human history. And thank you so much for sharing your own personal story as well and your own journey, mate. You're such a blessing, Abraham, and great to have more listeners in Sydney as well. You have a super day and call us again, okay?
Every day is a good day in the hands of the Lord.
Amen, brother. You have a super day. We'll talk again soon. Well, Peter, Soorkia and Phil, this has been such a fun show, and I just love hearing different people's perspectives on the same people, the same figures, how we all glean different things. But Peter Soorkia is a former pastor, but she's also still a pastor, but she's also a Christian wellness coach, a speaker, an author, and a couples counsellor, and she leads Peter Empowering You. Now, Peter, let's pretend someone's listening today, and their pastor may need a mentor or just a confidant or someone to come alongside them and coach them. How do people contact you? They may want to introduce you to their pastor, or you may just want to mentor and counsel just Christians as well, not necessarily pastors. What is the best way for people to contact you?
Oh, I'd love them to contact me through my website, peterempaworingyou.com. And I have a real heart for the pastors who are hurting, who are perhaps on the edge of burnout and just don't take a break, need a rest, need an ear. And it's hard to talk with people that are in your church. It's hard to get those people that are safe. And I would love to be that person, that set of ears for them. So just go to my website and send me a note and I'll respond back.
Yeah, and I know you'll be a huge blessing to everyone's pastor. And if you are a pastor listening, get in contact with Peta. She's a huge blessing. And Phil from the Rise and Shine program, thank you for joining us in the studio today. This was fun. We've got to do it more often.
Definitely. I love it. And great to have these conversations. So thank you for having me.
No, our pleasure. And Peta, looking forward to having you as our guest again in the near future as well.
I look forward to that as well. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.